And today I am super charged up about my co-host, the amazing Jeff Greenwald, a world champion himself in tennis and an elite sports mental coach for youths and adults. And we decided, and we had a lot of ways we could go, that this notion of expectations is something that's really has evolved greatly in meaning. And when Jeff kind of said, hey, this is what it started as, it just opened my eyes. And I think expectations can take us, can really be helpful or not so helpful. So Jeff, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be here with you, Molly. Yeah, excited.
Yeah. So Jeff is super amazing tennis person, as everyone knows out there. I can talk forever for tennis. So Jeff, the expectations, take folks through, because I was really surprised at the original intention and meaning of expectations versus how we have evolved it.
Right. Yeah. Expectations originally was about being alert and aware so you could be prepared for the future. Right. And we're here. You and I are talking, and anybody listening is here because of our brain that was able to anticipate the future. Yeah. We weren't the strongest, but we kind of were the smartest. And we outsmarted them, and we got here. And that's a blessing and a curse for us. We all sort of are carrying around this brain that can be very, very helpful and get us through the days, which it does. Some better than others and more easily than others, but it also creates suffering because we are able to look into the future, and expectations have become something different.
Yeah. And I think in the work context, because this becomes a skill, and you get kind of counseled, make sure you set expectations. And that has become, rather than being able to prepare so that you're be able to respond, it's about like how managing outcomes, which is like the kiss of death. And so, on the tennis court, it's that notion of, am I winning or am I what have you? But in work, that setting expectations of just kind of lowering the bar, and it's a little bit of a gamesmanship thing. And it really isn't very productive, because it's kind of focusing people on the results are the results are the results. It's not the process, right? And what we can actually impact. So just when you work with athletes of all types, I'm really curious how you get into the helping people realize their expectations to begin with.
Right. Well, it is starting to just take a look, right? You look at what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing, right? What your responses are in these moments, right? So that's where things start to open up. It's like, yeah, I played safe in that situation. I didn't want to miss, because if I missed, then I might miss more and then lose, right? So there's the outcome is it becomes sort of an entitlement too, to if you play somebody that, oh, I should beat them, right? That's a kind of an entitlement of outcome, which the original definition and purpose of it was to be alert and aware for variety, for things to happen that you're not prepare or expecting. So, but it's become more rigid over time, rigid and outcome based. And of course, the great irony is when you focus on the things that will help you, you tend to win more. But the brain, it's hard, right? It's hard because it's it's like the brain is in a survival mode, consciously or subconsciously, all the time. Will this help me or hurt me? What will happen if I do this, if I say this? And then what will they say? You can, in a few seconds, what will they say? How will you feel? I think I'll just keep worrying about it. I don't really want to do that thing because I'll feel worse if I do that. That's a whole interesting area too, of worry, and it overlaps with expectations, right?
Yeah, we talked about this before we went live. The whole ego part of it is really, and listen, ego in itself is not a good or better, right or wrong, but succumbing to, like you go out there, for me and little Molly playing tennis, I should be able to blah, 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 blah with that opponent. And then I have this expectation, and then I'm disappointed, and then I start to unravel. I mean, it just doesn't go well. And what are some things that we can do to free ourselves? This is public speaking for some people. That's your biggest fear. You're on the podium, maybe it's not going well. I'm curious, habits or techniques that people can apply to kind of keep them present so that you are focusing on what you can control instead of spiraling down.
Right. Yeah. Well, the first is to notice it, right?
Mm.
So in psychology, it's called metacognition, right? You're able to we're the only creature species that can think about thinking, right? So we can actually be aware when we have a thought like, oh, what will they think if I say this, or that will, if I make that mistake, and what will happen? And so you need to be aware of it, and not be spooked by it. Like, we all have negative thoughts. Look in the future, you're about to win the match. You look ahead, if this, the people will be happy. I'll get the trophy. I'll get the whatever status. And so that awareness is key. And then I have a model that I've developed over the years, which is really how to sort of fade out the worry, the negative thoughts, and so we can move more toward flow, the flow state, right? Which is being present and loving what you do, and
Yes.
being engaged, right? And having some perspective on it. It's not like life or death, right? So, but that, filtering out that fear is key. And then acknowledging if you're worrying and you're stuck in fear, and, well, what are you avoiding? Like, if we loop over stuff, it's like, what can you do, right? It's always like, do I control or not control? If you do control it, do that thing now or later, but okay, I'm going to do that. But we often are trading the worst feeling, like shame, for example. If we do this and then that happens, and it doesn't work out. If I go for my shots, I'll go all in, stay engaged the whole match, stay calm, don't freak out, and I still lose. That can be subconsciously worse than just looping. Oh, if this, if that. It's sort of it's a protective mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me in the workplace how I think we use it to kind of cap things, to play safe, which is not obviously what we want to do. And I think it gets down to this, God, heaven forbid we're wrong. We had a stretch goal, we didn't get it, but it was a stretch goal. That's what we're aspiring to. And I think for leaders, really recognizing how we respond when people are kind of going for it. And I think, in the sports world, I think setting that expectation of, I'm to your point, I'm going to go for my shots. Win, lose, whatever, I'm going to go for my shots. And really being good. I mean, I think we talked about people leading themselves, being good with what do you think you really want to do, and not letting the story of what everyone else is thinking drive us. And I think today, there's just this ability to lead ourselves first. Like, what do I want to have happen? And committing to what I think, and then being transparent about that, letting people know, getting help from people, that is something that I just want to encourage listeners to really think about, whether it's a sports context or a work context. And I think that being aware of that fear and why you have it, but then giving yourself permission to say, wait a second. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you've played in higher stakes situations. There's no ranking points, money, or anything associated with my tennis, and I still am afraid sometimes.
Yeah. No. I know. And of course, we all have fear, as Novak says. There's no match he's ever played that he didn't feel some anxiety, and it's just he doesn't stay in the anxiety or in the fear or the negative thoughts as long. He's able to reset, for example. We're human, and the expectations are sometimes, a disguise for, false confidence. Like, you expect this should happen. And, it sort of, it gets misaligned, expecting things to happen. For example, like you're saying, that if you do something kind for somebody, for example, and they take it the wrong way, or they take it their way, not wrong, actually, they take it their way, which is, maybe you were, belittling them, or they felt like, yeah, it was just, somehow it was unkind, and but if we expect somebody to respond a certain way, we say something and we expect them to just, oh wow, I see how, see what you mean, or have empathy, which we could do a lot more with these days. And I'd say that, that those expectations too get in the way, because people are going to respond how they respond, right? And it's hard. And then we want to hold on to our expectations. Like, that's where the rigidity comes in, which is not the original definition. It's alert and be aware. But we get rigid. We expect outcomes. We expect people to respond a certain way. We have mental models of the way the world should go, the way people will behave. And that keeps us sane. There's no way to get rid of expectations. They're a survival instinct and they're useful, but we've attached them to outcomes and become too rigid with them. So, you have to, at the end of the day, as you were saying, who am I? Why am I doing this? What do I really want? I want to win. I'll be number one at the club, and people think I'm great, and I'll think I'm kind of cool too for a while. But just being in a way that's authentic, that reflects your identity. Over time, you start to be like, well, how do I want to show up? How do I want to play? And I think a lot of people could relate to playing well, playing on their terms, the way they said they, committed to their shots, and end up losing in a good match. I've had that happen many times. And it feels satisfying, even though you lost. There's a satisfaction there. But when you don't go for our shots, say we don't, commit, we play safe, and we lose. So that doesn't feel good. We don't play like we want to. We lose. And that's the downward spiral, and that's the worst of it all, right? But if we stick to, things that matter to us and do them, things tend to work out more often.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I always tell people, if you have a dream, you got to state it and then it can manifest. But if you kind of keep it to yourself, it doesn't happen. But it's, so much. And so I just think in some ways it's kind of a curse too. So I'm really curious when you get out there, because you're the one who's helping everybody else with this, and then you're experiencing it. So I would love to hear some examples of when you're kind of like, wait a second, I'm not doing what I've been telling people to do. And how do you really get yourself to do it in the moment, when it really matters? You've been in some serious, situations.
No, I appreciate that question. And, the truth is, so for example, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I was playing and I was adjusting my game, trying to be, controlled aggression and just find my balance and a few other things. And it wasn't really working great. Like, it worked for a little bit and then it didn't. And my level was not, it's not what I remember it to be. And so that was creating some turmoil and a little bit and frustration. But what's replaced it once again, and it always seems to win the inner game, is curiosity. So what sort of manifested, as you're saying, is I became curious again about my state and how I was feeling, how I was approaching that shot, what actually happened. Did I hit it late out in front, too early, too forced? But starting to, not judge it and be a victim of the expectations that it should fix itself. It has in the past when I've adjusted. But the energy we have matters, right? Like if it's a little bit, if you feel urgency, or, I'm aging. So is it that my age and my eyesight and reactions are not as good as they used to be? And that's something then to accept. Right. But I'm feeling so good right now hitting the ball. I've been, practicing for about 3 weeks for this tournament coming up, and I'm hitting the ball. It's feeling just like it used to many years ago again. And I'm not winning every point, but I'm playing the right way. I'm playing the way I want to play and feel. And it's fun, right? So curiosity is huge. And then I lastly would say, those moments you talk about, like doing it or not doing it, that's what be alert and be aware. So you realize what you're doing, and it's sort of a moment, and you get many moments, maybe 120 moments in a match or 150,
Right.
where you can choose to swing through the ball. You can choose to be looser than you were if you're willing, and you're willing to miss. And that's the whole permission, because that's how you're going to find your best stuff, not by protecting, not by judging, not by not meeting your expectations. It's going to be curiosity, acceptance, and being aware.
I love this, and it's a completely direct parallel with the whole say it skillfully and the value of curiosity. And as leaders, what you just said is how we unleash the best in our people. And when they have that permission and when they can feel free, you can really do amazing things. It's I think it's so fascinating because in business, you do have these, like, we need to achieve this. This is our goal. We have to achieve these goals. And I get that. And it's important. But the results are the results are the results. And so all along the way, for the folks who can, to really help people step back and do just what you're saying. Hey, it was not going so well, or that relationship with that vendor isn't so great. What can we do to free people? And this expectation, like they should. I mean, people are going into conversations. They have a lot of difference in America today.
Yeah.
And that expectation of, well, they should think that this is this. And I get that. If we can just free ourselves a little and get to your curiosity, genuinely curious without making people right or wrong or judging, and say, hey, I really want to understand that. And I think that, I mean, I did a little bit of this last week, seriously, because I was thinking that I'm not really thrilled with the way things are going. How can we find ways to unify people? What can I do in some tiny, small way to help myself be a little bit better? And so I just really want to encourage folks to kind of say, hey, oh, they're not going to think they're always this way. I'm like, okay, if you want to say so-and-so is always going to be this way, or I'm going to always be this way, we're probably not going to go very far. So
Totally. I'm glad you bring that in. And, if you think about it, Molly, like, curiosity is in direct conflict with expectations, right? The way that expectations have evolved. Curiosity is about adaptability, and you're aware if you think about professional tennis, I have a few players in the Australian Open, and you think about they got the heat, coming from a different surface, travel, 12-hour flights, in a matter of a week, and people all around and different courts, the whole thing. To have expectations on things that will by nature be variable, like it starts to look like insanity. But at the same time, we need to have expectations, because that's how the world runs. So you need to expect that if you go to the airport at this time, you're going to be able to get through security and get on the plane, and
100%.
you have expectations that if you do these things, you'll earn the money you need to make, et cetera, right? But
Yeah.
if we can just maintain the curiosity, I think it sort of tempers this rigidity and the expectations that have become so outcome oriented, as you said.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you work with athletes, and I think people at work could imagine when you've got a colleague or something that's sort of stuck in their ways. And I'm curious if there's, without naming names, examples of how you can kind of see very clearly what's going on for that person. And maybe it's actually not such a hard fix, but they're really rebelling or struggling against, the change that you're proposing. I'm just wondering how you help um, these folks overcome that or see what's going on.
Yeah, well, when people are willing to have the conversation and are wanting something, um, and they're then faced with the choices they're making currently, which may not be helping them. So when that's continually confronted, and then you show them, you go into a candy store or whatever analogy, you could here's some, or, what do you like this? Do you like that? I mean, there's lots of different doors as well to bring people through, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, it's sometimes you have to, different doors, and you have to, pull them in a little bit, but they have to, of course, want it. And ultimately, to if they can find that curiosity and willingness to experiment, they see for themselves that it works better this way, mastery mindset and centering themselves, making the choice, fading out worry, moving to flow, being in flow. What does flow feel like, look like? How do you replicate that? And you hone in on some tools and specific, call it a blueprint for them to access flow. It becomes more of a default place. It becomes more easily accessible to them. So then it's like they can drop into it quicker. They know when they're not in flow, and they can drop in faster.
That is like, we'll want to bottle that up. Who doesn't want
Hmm.
to be in flow like all the time? It's like awesome. You know, I'm curious what motivates you when you work with folks. What do you get out of it?
Well, I think we were talking earlier, two of my favorite things are to play tennis and write, and to talk with smart, motivated people who happen to be curious about themselves, about how they can do things maybe a little differently, right?
Mm.
So having conversations that bring people forward, that maybe enlighten them in some way. And for me, um, that feels really just resonant for me as a person, to feel like I'm contributing in some way, right? In a way that maybe they never would have otherwise, or uh, want to excel, and um, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. I feel very, very fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I really just respect that about you, and for all the folks who've done the work to, get to know what your why is and to be able to stand for that, because your work's still your work, but there's a certain inherent joy and meaning and impact about it that, gosh, I want people they work hard. So I want people to feel like it's worth it, and it does take that own self curiosity, I think, that sometimes takes some time too to do that, and life can kind of be on a treadmill and we're moving along there. So I do want to encourage folks the time. And I know you went through you came on a podcast, had a really varied career, but that ability to think about what am I interested in and to go for it has just resulted in your ability to combine a lot of things that you love into something that you can do for work and make a difference.
Right. And I think, I'd like to just make one last point. I think we're stopping here shortly, but um, that what I also see, one of the parts that, brings me a lot of satisfaction, is that empathy is really at a is a scarcity now. Empathy for people's situation. It really kind of encompasses a lot of what we're talking about. And coming back to the state of the world right now, and people having expectations of the way things should go, or with the way they want them to go, and they'll hold really tight onto that, and then curiosity is lost. The expectations again are rigid, and I just wish people could allow themselves to stop and imagine and what it is like for somebody else, or why they might be thinking what they're thinking, instead of the way they're thinking is crazy and just off the wall, which sometimes it is in a sense, if clearly, without with no doubt about that. But and what is it that makes someone tick? What has brought them to that place to think this or that? And it's really hard to do in a lot of situations. I completely understand. At the same time, I think with our kids and families and friends and coworkers and coaches, to do better with that. It's a muscle too, right? It's a muscle you can build by sort of letting go of your expectations, being aware of that, filtering that out, and then really dropping yourself into someone else's shoes, which is not how you would feel if you were them. It's how they feel in their shoes, which is not an easy thing for humans to do. We didn't get here because of that. Well, on one hand we did because we belonged, but there's the other part that's about propelling forward, and we lose that empathy, I think, in the process without awareness.
Yeah, and it gets back to your curiosity of just the idea of considering. And so, I think one thing I think people are frustrated is that I can't solve it, change it, make it better like that. And I think we didn't get to this place overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But even the micro steps that people can take to themselves be more curious. And I often say that, um, this is the deal. We can't change what maybe someone thinks, but it is important that we have transparency of how we might think about that. And I think sometimes people think of silence as agreement. And if there's something that gets said, you don't have to be mean about it, but that ability to say, hey, I hear you, and you can get curious and understand a bit. And then it's important to be able to say, hey, I'm just not on the same page about that. Can love you as a human being still, or you're still my brother, you're still my sister, or what have you. But I do think that we need to kind of help create a better understanding that maybe there's some views out there, and maybe you don't see it hurting someone, but I do see it hurting someone. And I'm not here to make you wrong and me right, but I just think we have to start to inject any kind of little cue that could just encourage people to not be stuck in their ways, because I've been, I'm sure you have, stuck in my ways, and you're just grateful for the people who care enough to say, hey, you're being kind of a stick in the mud, or I'm noticing that this and that and the other, and is that really working for you? And I think your idea of empathy, of caring, actually turning on the opposite of what we might want to do, which is like to just tune it out because it's so painful. I mean, I know that's not easy for folks, but just I do think if you do the same things, and expect a different result, that is the insanity. So I just wanted to say to folks, empower yourself to see how today, tomorrow, you can do something maybe a little bit different, and hopefully get, a better outcome, or get more information that can propel us all forward.
Yeah, and if we can do the just pause and try to hear what they're saying, to understand them, just and let them know, I hear you, and some validation of what they're saying, and that's sort of maybe a reciprocal, an energy that can start to spread, where, because when people feel heard, they're more likely to hear you. So it's just that upward spiral in whatever we do. And we're all running around and busy, but if we can pause and notice, be aware,
Yeah.
and not, should on everything, should this or should that, then we might be in a better place.
I tried to abolish should. I think should is just not a great word.
Yeah, I know.
It's not
There's nothing really great.
There's
Yeah.
nothing great about that. Jeff, I want folks to be able to find out more about your work or learn from you. Where can we point them in terms of resources?
So they can go to mentaledgeforsports.com. I also have fearlesstennis.com for tennis specific folks. Free newsletter. Once a month, I send out some philosophical idea and something that I hope helps people, moves the needle a little bit. And my course is Fearless Tennis Course, and is on there as well, my website. So I'd say fearlesstennis.com is a good place for all those tennis players. And get into my community so we can share more good stuff.
Yeah, Jeff, you're really helping people, I think, whether it's tennis or whatever sports, but everything you've shared just helps people be grounded in themselves. I think control the controllables. And, we hear this and Say It Skillfully all the time: lead yourself first.
Right.
And it's not always so easy, and we're all perfectly imperfect. But I think giving ourselves grace for that, and giving ourselves permission sometimes to do what we really know we need to do, be our best friends, not our worst enemy. And that's really the spirit, I think, of this, of Say It Skillfully. Can you be who you really are? Can you say what you think you need to say? And, help the greater good. So I
Yeah.
want to thank you very much for joining me. I hope we'll have the chance to cross paths someday. Hopefully I'll get to watch you win a tournament. That would be really fun.
I'll come visit you in North Carolina too. Yeah.
That would be fab. And I want to thank all the listeners today. Would welcome your thoughts. And I do want to do one shout out. I have a dear friend, the amazing Wendy Greason, who started her own company, Brave Her. She wrapped up her first cohort. It's an amazing program for women in transition who are game on to be intentional and pursue success on their terms. And just like Jeff's been talking about, I think the spirit of Say It Skillfully, I want to really shout out to her and encourage people to go check out her site, which is joinbraveher.com, if that might speak to you. So thank you, everybody. Wishing you all well, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Take care.
Bye, Molly.
Ciao, ciao.